The identity of God. There are two parts to this argument. The first part concerns who God is absolutely, and therefore addresses the question as to which God is actually God. As a matter of logic, just because an entity is a central character in a theology does not make it God, not in the absolute sense. If you wish to call it a God, fine, but by definition there can only be one God. That is, if it to fit any reasonable definition of God. There can only be perfection in the singular. That is, you can't have multiple perfections. If it is to be labeled God and not perfect and singular in its manifestation of perfection, there must be something higher than this, and that singular perfection is actually God. Yet we know Christians say that God is three in one. This is irrelevant to the issue of perfection because the three are perfect in their unity and substance. There is a number we call three, and numbers point to qualitatively different classes to us. Each point in the three is a different thing. The dilemma of there being three in one is of our making, not God's. It's due to the way we think and see numbers. The unity of three is actually higher and more perfect than the unity of one. Total complementary unity is more complete than a singular absolute, which cannot be compared to anything. God, as a being that is three persons, can be compared to himself as the epitome of perfection, but mankind has always found issue with the existence of gods. This is also not a significant objection to his existence. Mankind's ability to be quarrelsome is not questioned or in doubt. What we need to establish is which conception is the highest and most perfect of all conceptions. This is God, regardless of how peevish mortals might reject the general idea of God. Until the naysayer can find something higher and more perfect than the conception of God, that most perfect of ideas is still the idea of God. The perfect conception of God is the one that is able to resolve all questions regarding God. This does not have to be done to suit all persons, only sufficiently to meet a threshold set by its nearest competitor. If my conception of God solves issues yours cannot, then my conception of God is higher and greater than yours. As to gender, God is male, not because he is sexual or identifies as male, but because male is a higher conception than female. God is male for the same reason he is God. He is God because he is the highest and most perfect conception of himself, and that includes his maleness. Male is higher than female in the same way heaven is higher than earth and earth is above hell. These are not physical locations. Man thinks in terms of the dimensions of space and the hierarchies of power. For man to be considered above the woman is for liberals a cross between an absurdity and a crime against humanity. Above does not mean better. The identity of God as a being of a singular substance and three identities is perfection incarnate, because as three beings of the same substance, they exhibit faith in an absolute sense. Faith in its absoluteness is the highest form of perfection. Perfect faith is perfection by definition. A God that is singular is detached and becomes a lawmaker and a lawgiver. But this is not the highest and the most perfect of all conceptions of God, because law is not perfect, and it is not a perfect conception. This is why man must have faith, and why faith is ultimately the responsibility of men. In our faith, we manifest the identity and the perfection and the perfectibility of God.